I'm gonna cut this part out, don't worry. Maybe add some fun intro slides, wouldn't that be cool? Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen, folks and friends, all the people at home. Hopefully you are at home, because that's where you should be during a worldwide pandemic. Hope you're doing well today. Today we are going to be talking about the interwar years. Technically, the interwar years are 1919 to 1939, but having said that, you know, it's a little bit of a floppy kind of an idea, and anything else that doesn't really sort of fit into the categories of World War I and II, we're just gonna kind of stick in here. So, let's see what we got. Sorry, I've got coffee in my throat. It's not anything else, I promise. All right, so our main idea for the interwar years is that economic destabilization is almost as bad as political destabilization. This is because people without money get desperate and upset. So here we have our little gentleman. He has no money. No. And he is sad and upset. I think I might be out of... I'm out of ink in my blue pen! Oh my gosh, that's so sad. I might have to venture out of the house at some point. Horrifying. Okay, so he has no money. What ends up happening? When you have no money, usually you also become unemployed. And that's usually like one of the main causes for why you don't have money. Then when you're unemployed, you can't pay your bills, which usually leads to people getting sick or getting kicked out of your house. And then usually, this leads to fear, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Hate leads to who to blame. Who should we blame? We should blame, usually, either the government or some other kind of scapegoat category. So we will notice during this time period that, yeah, okay, occasionally the government does in fact get blamed for things. For example, the Russian Revolution. But, and also kind of sort of the Weimar Republic a little bit. Germany. But also more particularly scapegoat groups. So, for example, in Germany, it is so much easier to convince people that the Jewish community is at fault for this because everybody is looking for somebody to blame. So it's very easy for the Nazis and the fascists to be like, here is somebody to blame. Oh, thanks. So Jewish people, rich people, but the bourgeoisie dogs. Sometimes intellectuals fall into this category because people really don't like being made to feel stupid. So there you go. So all of these things tend to lead to really, really, really bad things. These in particular tend to lead to World War II. But also the Holocaust, the Armenian Genocide, ain't that a kick in the head? Armenian Genocide, World War II, the Holocaust. What else can we throw in there? The Great Purges from Stalin. We'll talk more about that later. Mistreatment of Koreans and Chinese people by Japan. And probably we could throw in there things like, anger and anxiety against poor people in the United States. And sort of like we mentioned, extremist ideas have an easier time of taking hold when conditions are unstable. When people are upset, it is really easy to sort of, put in these ideas in their head that are like, hey, here is somewhere to direct your anger and your feelings. So it's really very, very easy for extremist ideas to be like, okay, I'm going to direct your feelings of anger against rich people. I'm going to direct them against the Jewish people. I'm going to direct them against intellectuals. It's a lot easier for that to happen. So in times of crisis, it's really, really important for us as humans to make sure that we are just taking extra time and being very careful and making sure that, things like freedoms and liberties and the normal processes of our society continue to function in a reasonable way. So, for example, the coronavirus is not an excuse to suspend people's right to a fair and free trial. For example, just because there's a virus doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't get a fair trial. So this is, because of that, these ideas that we were talking about that are extremist and pretty terrible most of the time. I only say that because, like, once in a blue moon, communism has something nice. For example, literacy rates really go up in the USSR, and that's nice. But then, 5 million people die in one of the famines, so that's pretty terrible. There is nothing good about fascism, Nazism, or genocide. And this is the era of fascism, Nazism, communism, and genocide. Yuck. Okay, so what are we doing with the communists anyways? You will also notice that I have like 8 different spellings of the word czar. You can spell it like this, you can spell it like this, you can spell it like this, you can spell it like this. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is we are talking about the Russian emperor. And I'm going to give him a big beard. Because when I think of Russia, I always think of Peter the Great's beard tax. So, big beard on the Russians. And he's the Tsar. He's the Tsar. He's also this Tsar. He's also that Tsar. He's also that Tsar. The Tsar that we're going to be talking about is Tsar Nicholas II, who was delightfully nicknamed Nicky, which is amazing. Okie dokie. Russian Revolution and Civil War, that's pretty gnarly and nasty. They overthrow the Tsar. He's all sad and also super dead. They reorganized the country, first under Leninist Marxism and then under a Stalinist dictatorship, and there's lots of death and chaos. But Russia is the only communist power for about 25 years. It takes a lot longer for China to get their act together. And some other states adopt communism after World War II, after they are decolonized. And part of this is because they are separating from these capitalist countries, and they're like, well, we didn't like that, let's try something new. And part of it also is because during this time there were lots of successes in the communist world. China and Russia were doing reasonably well, famines aside. So some other states that adopt communism: North Korea, Vietnam, the Eastern European bloc, which is forced to have communism. Cuba is another really good example of a communist country. And I really want you to understand that when they say communist, they're trying. True communism is really unobtainable because it involves everybody being equal, and that just never, ever, ever is completely possible. So they're trying, but is Vietnam really a communist state? Is China really a communist state? No. Here are communist buddies. Over here we've got Stalin. He was quite short. And Chairman Mao. Excellent. And then here we have the Cold War military alliances, because we are coming to that very, very soon. So you will notice that the dark blue is the founding members of NATO. And then the lighter blue are the people who get to join NATO a little bit later. And then the red are the people who form the Warsaw Pact, which is the sort of opposition to NATO that we will see later. And that's mostly East Germany and the USSR. Okay, I am sure you are all very familiar right now with anxiety. World War I brings about huge changes and makes everybody really anxious. which again, I'm sure you're familiar with right now. They create Mother's Day in France to encourage childbearing because so many people died. Enormous casualties promote social mobility. Commoners start moving on up. There's a beautiful moment, and I think it's Downton Abbey, where like the war ends and all of the servants are like, well, but we don't have to servant again. That's not a thing anymore. Women increasingly gain the right to vote. So women are like, we are people. In the United States, I believe it's 1920 that women gain the right to vote. Hashtag women are people. Who'da thunk? Women are people. And there's also a new consumerism. There's tons of fun stuff everywhere. And this leads us into a really interesting time period as well, because yes, it's the age of anxiety, but the 1920s are super fun and fancy because you get flappers and you get prohibition. Well, this is just the United States. Prohibition, or the making illegal of selling, distributing, and consuming alcohol, causes Americans to go party like it's 1922. Party. Ain't no party like a Gatsby party, because a Gatsby party don't stop until at least 2 people are dead and everybody is disillusioned with the jazz age as a whole. If you are interested in some reading, I highly suggest The Great Gatsby. It's an awesome book, though I didn't get it in high school, and I don't know if, you'll agree with me that it's a great book just yet. Give it 20, 30 years till you're disillusioned and jaded. Anyways, the 1920s are a good time in most of the world, but you can only go up before it's time to come down, and then we get the Great Depression. And with the Great Depression comes all of these really terrible things. So it's not just that the economy is depressed, but everybody is too. Capitalism is really unstable, and a lot of people don't like to acknowledge that fact, because it is saying that capitalism is flawed. There is nothing wrong with being flawed. Absolutely nothing. But you need to make sure that you are recognizing that there are flaws, and not that you jettison the system entirely, but you're looking for ways to fix those flaws, looking for solutions. Nothing wrong with having flaws. It's wrong when you just ignore the flaws and allow them to continue. So capitalism is really unstable, because sometimes capitalism is super good and awesome, and everybody's happy and everybody's making plenty of money, but capitalism does not encourage a social safety net. If you have a social safety net, and it's just like this little trampoline for people that just like make sure that you're not going to go hungry, or you can have access to medical care, stuff like that, then having capitalism really isn't that bad, because the bust portion never goes too terrible if you have social safety nets. So if your healthcare is not tied to your employment, if you lose your employment, you at least have the social safety net of your healthcare, kind of a thing. Or like if everybody got a universal basic income, or UBI, then we're making profits, but we still have enough to pay for the basic necessities of life: food, shelter, toilet paper, clothes for your kids, stuff like that. And it threatens the livelihood of the people who are right about here. Because these people up here are hardly ever going to fall all the way down here. It's very, very, very rare. And usually when they do, they don't stick around very long. There was a large rash of American businessmen right after the crash of 1929 who killed themselves because they could not handle coming all the way down here. And poor people are already down here. So poor people, the Great Depression is terrible because there are no social safety nets whatsoever during the Great Depression. So poor people who suddenly lose everything have literally nothing. And it makes it for very hard living. But the people who are really threatened by the capitalist system are those people who rely on things like industry, because industry usually relies, there we go, on supply and demand. Nobody is interested right now in going on cruises, for example, mostly because we're supposed to be staying at home kind of a thing. So what Groupon right now, the like group coupon thing, probably isn't faring very well because the supply or the demand isn't there. And honestly, the supply isn't there either because all the establishments are closed. So if you are an industrial worker who's working in something like tires, and suddenly nobody is going anywhere and therefore nobody is buying tires because they don't need them, your job could be threatened by that. Having said so, if you have a social safety net, it's a lot harder for you to go so far down. So because of this, it promotes individualistic materialism. Gotta get for me when I can, what I can, and it encourages huge social inequality. So we have tons, well, not tons, but we have a whole bunch of people up here, and we have so many people down here, particularly in the United States, and we're going to be focusing on them because they're the main people affected by the Great Depression, but still. So jobless men keep going. We can't take care of our own. They can't even take care of their own. People who are coming by and looking for something, just move on out. Okay, so I'm actually going to save this for the next lecture because I'm trying to make sure that I'm limiting the size and the length of these videos. So, sorry this one was really talky and not a whole lot of pictures, but when we're talking about these really basic ideas and big ideas like capitalism, you kind of have to take your time with them. So, let me draw you one last really silly picture. How about... Oh! I already did a snail. How about a bat? Here's a bat. I have big ears and big wings. Huh? Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. I'm a bat. Bats are so cute. I have discovered through my Korean lessons that the word for bat in Korean is literally like night mouse, which I think is the best thing ever. And now I'm looking for like portmanteaus in all the words that I'm studying. For example, zebra equals stripy horse, which is amazing and I love it. So studying languages, a really awesome way to make connections and to keep up your brain, keep it healthy and flexible, and that's the end of my not history plug for today. Hope you enjoyed that really bad drawing of a bat. I will talk to you soon to talk about, isn't depression just being really sad? No!